Well, you know who's waking up happy this morning? Michigan fans. That's because the #1 quarterback prospect in the class of 2025, Bryce Underwood, flipped his commitment from LSU to the Wolverines last night. Underwood, who grew up 30 minutes from the Big House, making the announcement with a video on social media captioned simply as "Hometown Hero." The 6'4", 210-pound pivot had committed to LSU back in January, but now becomes a likely day one starter in Ann Arbor. With his signing on December 4th, Underwood will be the first #1 recruit to join Michigan since the program inked defensive tackle Rashawn Gary back in 2016. He would also join Gary and defensive backs Jabril Peppers and Dax Hill as the only 5-star prospects to land in Ann Arbor since 2006. He will mark the Wolverines' highest-ranked quarterback pledge since Michigan landed Ryan Mallett in the class of 2007. All right, so let's talk about this from an LSU perspective by bringing in our LSU insider from 24/7 Sports, Bryce Kuhn. Bryce, good day for Michigan fans, not a great day for Tigers fans. How big of a blow is this to the team and to head coach Brian Kelly?
Well, Jeremy, it can't be understated enough that just 2 weeks away from signing day, you lose not just the crown jewel, but really a de facto leader of this class. You mentioned earlier, this is a guy who had committed in January, was one of the big ambassadors for this 2025 class as they push towards the top spot overall in the class ranking. So you lose not just a guy who had been a symbol of what you wanted to build in Baton Rouge, but you also lose a de facto one of the most important players on the football field in your quarterback. So it really does put Brian Kelly, Joe Sloan, and this entire staff, both on the field and in the recruiting sphere, it puts them behind the 8 ball. Now you've got to figure out, what are your quarterback plans going forward? Can you convince Garrett Nussmeier to come back for 2025? And obviously those talks now feel like they have to happen more than they did just a week or two ago. So it definitely creates some unrest, I would say, inside that football ops building just down the road.
One of the things that's been discussed is the fact that the money here, the NIL money, obviously a very competitive package from Michigan, but that wasn't the main issue for Underwood because he was going to get that money no matter where he ended up going. So I'll ask you, where did LSU come up short here?
Yeah, it's, when you get into these figures, Jeremy, there's a lot of conversations around the idea of a number. From what I've been told from multiple sources is that this was a situation where Michigan went back to the drawing board. They went back down into their board of directors, their board of NIL, however you want to look at it, and they were able to up the ante in terms of guaranteed money. We're led to believe that that guaranteed money was close to around the 10 million figure mark, where LSU, their number was slightly below that, but more incentive-based to push him up towards there. So, look, from Underwood and his family's standpoint, you talk about guaranteed money at 18 years old. That's life-changing. Michigan just upped the ante, where LSU was kind of cautious in terms of handing out that amount of money guaranteed without any type of guarantee in terms of production or meeting any type of lines and quotas.
So, Bryce, let's go back to the Garrett Nussmeier conversation here. Is there a thought that they could get Nussmeier to come back for another year?
It's very interesting, Jeremy. You start to kind of peruse the draft boards across different publications, and obviously there's still some people who have fallen in love with the intangibles and just the playmaking ability that Garrett Nussmeier has shown in flashes. But for LSU fans and a lot of fans across the country, you see where he has not only fallen short, but this offense as a whole has fallen short of expectations. So the conversations between offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Joe Sloan, as well as Brian Kelly and Nussmeier and his camp, are going to be something to monitor over the next, not just 2 weeks, last 2 weeks of the regular season, but just going forward about what it brings to the table in terms of, could you see a year 2 jump like Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels did? Or is this enough for him to want to test the waters? It's a conversation that Nussmeier is a little bit different from other guys. Obviously, with the background and the family that he has that has played a role in the NFL, there's maybe a larger understanding of what could happen. But this becomes all more imperative for you to get him back on campus, continue to develop the young guys, and then also try to look in the portal and see what you could find in terms of experience behind him to help out as well.
All right, so with the Underwood flip, where does this recruiting class for 2025 sit right now?
Ooh, it's rocky. I would say it's rocky, and then, like I mentioned earlier, there's a little bit of unrest in that LSU football ops building as they prepare for the final stretch here before signing day. Look, you have a lot of big names in this class, but where do we go from here? Bishop Gorman, 5-star receiver Derek Meadows, has already been projected by multiple outlets to flip to Michigan. It was in large part thought to the reason that Meadows was tied to Underwood, not a lot of Louisiana ties for the Las Vegas, Nevada native. And then you look at DJ Pickett at a prime position position of need for this LSU team, a 5-star corner. Corey Raymond has done a fantastic job recruiting him, but Miami has been lurking. Also, you have to keep an eye on a couple of other guys as well who are going to be taking some visits outside the state and other places in general. Could other teams up the ante with their offer, forcing LSU to maybe use some of that money they had set aside for Underwood as leverage? It's a completely different day and age of college football. You have to be willing to play the game, and LSU has some work cut out for them as they're just 2 weeks away from signing day.
One of your 24/7 colleagues, John Talty, wrote an article this week about maybe some of the pressure that's developing on Brian Kelly with the shoving, the yelling last week with one of the players, the fact that the third year, which has traditionally been successful for him, is not successful this year. Here we get the Underwood flip. If he loses one of these other high recruits, I mean, is Kelly's job in danger here based on that and what could happen these last couple weeks of the season?
Well, I think one thing you have to take a look at, Jeremy, is just in terms of the buyout number. And, this is a program in LSU that has money, but not to the ways that maybe Texas A&M did and the way they dealt with the Jimbo Fisher situation. So it's going to be something to monitor. You mentioned if they continue to lose out on some recruits, if we see a couple flips here from the top guys on that board, but also you have 2 games against teams that on paper you should be able to beat. And, I was joking with someone earlier this week that if they lose to Vanderbilt this weekend, you are going to feel that seat just get a little bit warmer and warmer. Obviously, the flip of Underwood does kind of incite a little more conversation around this, but it'd be interesting to see around a $60 to $61 million buyout in terms of Brian Kelly. Is it enough to push Scott Woodward, the AD, over the edge? I'm not quite sure that's right now, but obviously, as we know, anything can change at the drop of a hat here as you have multiple teams kind of looking to flip some candidates, and you have 2 more important games for LSU and Brian Kelly.
Yeah, you mentioned they have Vanderbilt this weekend, and then they finish against Oklahoma. 24/7 LSU insider Bryce Kuhn joining us to discuss #1 quarterback prospect Bryce Underwood's Thursday night flip from LSU to Michigan. Thanks, Bryce. And for more from 24/7 Sports and for more on the Underwood flip, be sure to check out 247sports.com. And while you're there, check out the recruit rankings, class rankings, and all the latest news as we head towards signing day on December 4th.